Yeah, I was just welcoming you all to being here on this episode of TAD Talk, where we welcome Ravi Chambers to this discussion. And today's talk will be about certitude being a double-edged sword. We came up with this title when I asked Ravi what he would like to speak about, something that, is kind of burning in him, some issue or something that he feels needs to be addressed within our community, something that's important to him. So we came up with this topic and this title, and we'll we'll go forward with this. Hugo will first introduce Ravi and tell you a little bit.
Yes, thank you, Bhaktiras. So, welcome everyone. Um, you may already know Ravi, though for those of you who don't, it was my pleasure just to meet him the other day in preparing for today's talk. And Ravi, don't let me misconstrue your background. So please, if you can, share a few sentences, a little bit about your background.
Super. Well, really kind of you to ask me to come on here. I met Bhakti Ras a little while ago and really connected, and nice to meet you the other day, Yugala, and hopefully get to meet more of your community. Um, I grew up in Ireland. As a teenager, I wanted to be a stockbroker, so I was quite materialistic. Yeah, at the same time, I had a burning and yearning to understand those big questions in life. So I studied different traditions and so on, but I met a senior Hare Krishna monk at the Dublin Temple when I was about 2021. I used to go to the Sunday feast, and he offered me the opportunity to travel with him, and I took that opportunity. He was a very sort of attractive personality. His name was Tribhuvanath, and otherwise I would have happily been an armchair philosopher, to be honest. I would have happily just come on Sundays. And so I spent 7 years then as a brahmachari, very full on, completely, really thought I would do it for my whole life, was convinced of it. And we'll come on to that in a bit, just how definite and certain you can be at a certain point. And it's hard to imagine it changing, but then, it changes. And it's easy to think first that that might be a bad thing, but we're going to come on to see that it needn't necessarily be a bad thing. So yeah, I spent 2 years in Africa, a year in India, and most of the rest of the time in Ireland and England, um, helping him put on Hare Krishna festivals for the public. I went on then and did various work, and now I've got two boys. I've got a family, two boys who are 10 and 13, and I run a film production company. And so I'm, I guess, very much immersed in the world, but hopefully keeping the some spiritual life alive alongside that in a more integrated way, I think, these days.
Thank you for sharing. Those are all new. That is all new information to me, and it connects quite well with some questions. I was speaking with some brothers just the other day about that time period where maybe you were first introduced to Krishna consciousness, or maybe you had lived in a temple or a preaching center, or maybe you had taken the brahmacharya ashram officially in some capacity. Um, would you care to maybe speak more to that question of, today's theme?
Yeah.
How did certitude play out in that early phase of your devotional life in the temple, in brahmacharya?
Yeah, it was essential, I suppose, for me to take such a big step. I don't think I could have taken such a big step if I wasn't completely convinced. Um, and that took a little while. It was quite interesting. I always try to reflect, like, it's funny, anyone who's listening who's either been in a similar situation or been around temples and sort of, sometimes I always like to think about in any scene, let's just say, I'm not trying to make it too filmy, but let's say a scene. um, you have different characters in the scene, and depending on whose character you're seeing through the eyes of you'll see the scene in a different way, sometimes in a very different way. Um, and I remember in the period where I was coming along regularly on Sundays, and I'd studied a lot of different traditions. So I suppose in the language that devotees might be used to, I started as an atheist, and I guess maybe then as I came into spiritual life, maybe I was like many people, kind of thinking about things in a more impersonalist way, perhaps. And after the Sunday feast, Tribhunath and I were having a conversation, and some of the other younger devotees were around. And I was arguing whatever I was arguing, and he was kind of putting forward, the Krishna conscious thing. And the hilarious thing is, afterwards, some of the other devotees said to me, "Oh, just see how he defeated you, how he completely whatever." And I was thinking, no, he didn't. So it was quite funny. How when you're entrenched in a certain way of thinking, you see everything in that way of thinking. But when you're not, you don't see it in that way. You see it in a different way. So but anyway, over due course of time, I became completely convinced of the way, the normal way that we have the package, let's just say, that
Do
we've
you
kind of.
remember any of that that initial conversation or debate, or do you remember any of those first questions that you had asked? To me, a few
Mm,
things stand out from that time. Like the first book I had been acquainted with, other than the Gita that we were studying somewhat together, I had read Beyond Birth and Death by
yeah.
Bhaktivedanta Swami. And that first page gave me somewhat of an existential crisis where I realized, well, if I'm not my body, I have no reference point for what I am. And I actually really had a sort of out of body experience just in reading that one page. And at
Mm,
that point, then the questions were on. What am I? What is consciousness? What is
yeah.
death, etc.
Yeah. I think perhaps because of my previous studies, that part of it wasn't such a shift. It was more kind of like I was kind of firmly at the point where I could accept, we're spirit souls, we are eternal, material life is temporary and shifting. We're on this kind of journey. We have this eternal relationship with the Supreme. I kind of that much I could, well, maybe it wasn't I could understand it at least. It made a lot of sense. I suppose the big jump, and I still think it's the big jump,
Hmm.
is from that. I didn't think it was a big jump in between, but I'm coming back to thinking it was a big jump. Is the very defined and definitive idea of what exactly what God is and looks like, and all of those very defined details. Now, I'm not for a moment saying that they're not correct, but I'm just saying it's a huge jump, you know, um, because it's so, in terms of certitude, it's so certain, it's so final. There's nothing to be said after that. Like, there's nowhere to go after that. So you kind of have, if you're going to move forward in that direction, you have to accept it. Otherwise, you'll go somewhere else, I guess. Sorry, back to your ask. Go for it.
Well, it's just as you were speaking, well, actually, when first thing with Ugala, um, the existential crisis really is like the duty of the guru, of the teacher, is to place us in these existential crises where we
Mm,
will question and look at the things that we accept as normal, as a status quo, that these are known as sacred disturbances, and
mm,
they're usually what shake up our conceptual framework enough so that we can, disorder, order, reorder, kind of thing. And um, yeah, like you were saying, these are important, and one of the dangers with having so much knowledge in our Gaudiya tradition is that we think we have conclusive answers, that we actually think that we know what these things mean. So
mm,
it's not just even so, like, yeah, we hear that Krishna has a peacock feather and he's this shade and he's that shade. But what the heck is a peacock feather in transcendence? And
Hmm.
so we think we know God,
Mm.
Um, but what is it that we're actually knowing? And
Mm.
since they are always expanding and in a process of becoming, how can we ourselves think that we have captured what and who God is? What to
Yes.
speak of, even with our own individual selves. It's beautiful what you were talking about. I love that about the film, and depending upon the perspective of the character, that the environment will take on a completely different
Mm.
reality, really. So
Yes.
speaking about this, like within with our own selves, but we project that my environment is exactly what you're experiencing. And
Yes, yeah, that's a really good point. And it jumped to my mind. I haven't really thought about this for such a long time, but we've heard it many times, I'm sure, is that there's that idea that the teacher or the guru can only really kind of guide you to the extent that they've understood or at least ventured, let's say, even if they, you know. So obviously it's not wise. I wouldn't be saying, oh, well, this person's here and this person's there and all of that. But actually, perhaps a lot of the stuff that we're told is it is just the same thing, like black and white and kind of and just repeated. Whereas you'd imagine, if based on what you said a moment ago, that the the statement can be there, the line can be read in the book, whatever it is. But according to the depth that one has ventured into it, in that spirit of kind of that there is tremendous depth there rather than it's just what it says there and that's it. If there is that depth there, then the person who could be guiding us, depending on how, so if they have gone deeply into it, surely there's going to be something more they're saying about it than just the kind of same dogmatic thing that we often do here.
Mm,
Do you know
mm.
what I mean?
yeah, exactly. I totally agree.
It
And
almost makes me think of, please, Bhakti Ras.
it's okay. It's, it's, I think spiritual knowledge goes this way. It goes into the depth and breadth. And the deeper we go, the bigger it gets. And that's why mystics and things who go deeply into things realize they actually, the more they know they don't know.
Yes.
There is
Yeah.
so much more on the other side of knowing than we could possibly know. And so
Mm.
how, foolish it is that we can be so certain that we're ready to punch another person in the nose, you
Yeah.
know, um, when there's so much that we have no idea about, that we don't even know that we don't know.
Yes.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
but yet we're so certain about it.
But if you think about where the need for certainty comes from, not not to oversimplify it, but one of the things is fear. So
Mm.
it's like, so how, if I do feel like I've arrived at a thing of certainty, then there is a great relief in that initially. There's a great sense of arrival, safety, um, confidence, sort of certainty that is pretty, wonderful. But the thing is that, so if then over time, people that gets, let's say threatened, then you have to be very brave. You have to be very to go out again into the uncertainty, maybe within the framework, but um, because you're going to lose some of those things that you wanted so much and you've got them right now. And okay, maybe, you even, who knows what's going through someone's head, but maybe even they kind of go, well, maybe, but I'm not going to do it because I'm good here. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I remember I said to someone once, close to me, and I said, oh, I think you should they were a little older, and I said, "Do you not think you should go to therapy?" And they said, "No, at this age, I'm not gonna go there. I'm gonna just leave it because I don't want to." It's almost like not wanting to start on a journey that you don't feel ready to take. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I get it. But
Yeah,
I
yeah.
suppose there's a humility in that if you understand that's what's happening, because you can say I'm just going to stay here. And, you don't, do you know what I mean? Like you have an awareness of what's happening and you're still making your decision and respect to that decision if that's what you're doing, But I don't want to get into personalities at all, but like, in a way, Prabhupada, was the one who was the one so definite and so defined and whatever. And when we talked briefly the other day, we realized that maybe, you said it back to your ass that he kind of had to be to get something off the ground in such a short period of time and whatever. I think maybe the issue is that we're then getting stuck there. Because
Mhm.
if you look at, and like I said, I don't want to be about this one, that one, but Sridhar Maharaj, whenever the little bits that I've heard, where they went to him, he was that humble guy who was super knowledgeable, who was like, well, it's like these things are a bit of a mystery, or, he was kind of poetic, or he would kind of, it was in black and white. And so it is sad, we can't change the past, that maybe there couldn't have been these different personalities within the one thing to kind of like an uncle and a this and a that to kind of balance it
Balance.
out. And you know, but we have gone down this super fanatical thing about one just only Prabhupada. And there is dialogue amongst some devotees now that like that actually is not serving Prabhupada or is done out of a love for Prabhupada, but it is the worst thing I think that you could do if you know what I mean. Like in other words, it's almost like limiting him to this one
Yeah.
dimensional aspect of him and saying and just not allowing that it to be anything else apart from that one way of seeing him. And I think it's caused huge just difficulty to his movement.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And we, yeah, and we do it with each other, and we did it with Srila Prabhupada for sure. And we limit and cut off, and we do the same thing with with God also,
Yeah.
depending upon, you know, how we define them, and we put them into boxes and nail, and that become coffins basically, and nail it shut, and they can't come out. And it's a, I think the intention is to protect what they've given, but it does have the opposite effect. And Srila Prabhupada is still, can be alive and active currently in our life, and isn't just a relic that
Mm.
he existed in the past, and there he was, and this is what he did, and we need to preserve it. So let's put it in concrete, or let's chisel it out of marble, and
Mm.
we'll give it a shape and a form that'll withstand
Never
time,
change. Yeah.
never change.
Yeah. I mean, a good analogy is like a parent. There's different ways to parent, uh, and obviously there's an instinct. Again, a lot of it's from fear of like, oh, well, I don't want my children to get hurt or to anything to happen to them or for them to do the wrong thing. And all of this fear, fear, fear. So then I will try and control them completely. And I will try and control all the environment completely, which you can't anyway. Um, and in a way, you just stifle them because like it's kind of like what would be the worst thing? Like, we say we want to preserve, and of
Yes.
course, I get it. Like, I get it. I'm not saying like we still have to all be responsible and thoughtful and intelligent, but within that, there needs to be some kind of trust that what's the worst thing? Let's say we do make a mistake. If we're on that path of thoughtfulness and reflection, whatever else, we'll probably realize ourselves, or someone can say it, and we can. So in other words, the path can go like this, but it's still going forwards, rather than it can only be this, and Otherwise, it cannot move forwards. Do you
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like with a child, let them fall over and hurt their knee and cry and then they'll be okay. And then they can figure out maybe that wasn't a good thing or whatever, or we can talk about it. So it's kind of like it's overly restrictive, I think. Well intentioned, albeit.
Yeah. Well intentioned. And it's overly secure, which is interesting because that's becoming a topic of discussion nowadays. What's happening to our children, to the next generation, by overly protecting them. Playgrounds now, they're padded,
Yeah.
so when kids fall off a, a swing or something, they fall onto a padded, cushiony thing. Whereas
Yeah.
before we would fall onto gravel. I'm not saying that these things are necessarily bad, but it creates an overprotected, over idealized world where trying to protect people from pain, from things that actually will inspire them to look and see within themselves, to be introspective and to learn what is this suffering actually trying to speak. What is the message here? And
Mm.
there's so much healing involved um, in that type of inquiry, but we try to protect ourselves from having any of that experience, any of the
Mm.
suffering, any of the difficulties, any of the crises. We think crisis is something that's bad and should be avoided, and as soon as we're in it, we should get out of it.
Mm.
It's
And
actually an opportunity.
definitely. And so again, same thing, like if you think about it in many different ways. So like say in a work setting, learning to have difficult conversations, learning to deal with conflict in a grown-up kind of way, that makes you a way better leader, manager. You're more valuable because you have an asset that is rare. Then if you take it into the society like ours, like ISKCON or whatever, that's my background. And it's like, say if we've done something terrible, the world will see not, I mean, obviously they'll judge you for what you've done, but they will then, that you can't change that. They'll judge you for how you're dealing with it. So a mature, responsible organization takes responsibility and says, yes, this is awful, but this is what we're doing about it,
Yeah.
rather than some kind of, PR thing or whatever. Um, the UK in the UK, there's a huge thing going on at the moment, all about something similar in the English church, and that's
Saw
people
the
who.
Archbishop of
That's
Canterbury resigned or something like that.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. And it's a big debate amongst the people. And I guess this is just as a sidebar, there are a lot of intelligent people in the society, and they are, sometimes I think in our presentation of the world, we kind of go, they're all stupid, all these people, that these are just the commies. They know nothing. See, man, these people are out there cultivating all these good qualities as we speak, in their own way, trying to become better and all of that. But we feel we can, and this is again, the interesting thing about that last little bit of certitude is for all of that goodness, and it's the classic line we say, for all the zeros, it's zero because there's no one. And our one is this very specific way of seeing it,
Mhm.
which is a leap, in one way. And we're putting all our cards, like, not, let's use a gambling metaphor for a second. We're putting all of our cards down on that thing, and we're willing to burn the world down on that one hand. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? It's a big one. And so
The funny
what I'm
thing,
saying, go on.
the funny thing, Ravi, is that in the term that Swami Padmanabha invokes in talking about certainty within Gaudiya Vaishnavism is specificity.
Mm,
Things are very just so. I
yes.
like 3 ladus with my dessert for dessert and 1 tablespoon of sugar, and anything like that's how Krishna likes it, and that's just how it is.
Yes.
Um, and invoking such specificity uh, you're basically trapping the freedom. You're confining the freedom of the Leela. You're confining the really the life force. Is it, it's not something that we can just nail down to these very, very specific things. I feel like that term specificity
Mm.
really drove it home and made it clear to me. Like I'll use two now. I am somewhat, I'll say, a lay scholar or theologian. These things I've been studying for 10 to 15 years, and the terms that are used are cataphatic and apophatic ways of knowing. Apophatic meaning what God is not,
Mm.
cataphatic meaning what God is. So we have a lot of this: God is this, God is this, God is this. Actually, quite thankfully to our tradition, the Upanishads mostly begin with what is not.
Yeah.
Neti, neti. It is not this, it is not this, it is not this, the soul is not this. I mean,
Mm.
I'm just thinking of Krishna saying in the Gita, the soul cannot be moistened, it cannot be dried out, it cannot be, so how those two elements of invoking um, definiteness and at the same time indefiniteness. How
Mm.
has that, maybe, is there a reflection you have on that, or how has that sort of been there in in your journey?
Sure, sure. Well, just I was actually thinking about this earlier today, knowing that, just kind of passing through my mind, knowing we're having this conversation. It's again, that thing I talked about at the beginning about depending where you're standing in the scene. So let's say we're standing inside, let's call it the temple or the bubble, whatever it is. We're seeing things in a very particular way, like you said, specificity. It's like this, it's like this. And what that often creates is uniformity. And actually, you take a step back, you turn around and you look out into the world, which is, if Krishna is the source of everything, then certainly he's the source of all of this variegatedness and this individuality and this beauty and expression
Mm,
of, difference and
yes.
variety. And so, how on earth? Like, in other words, no wonder you almost have to retreat from all of that into this tiny little bubble to kind of all become the same. Do you know what I mean? It's
Yes.
not an actual,
Yes.
doesn't make sense. Like each of us, and I think it's also out of it's a bit out of a fear because everybody knows at any temple that you've been around or whatever, there's everyone's pretty much the same, and there's always one or two people who are sort of more being themselves, and they're kind of seen, oh, they're a bit whoa. And it's like
They're eccentric.
they're eccentric, yeah, and sometimes they are eccentric. But the thing is that really the little cross section that we often get in the temples or in these little things is not really a very broad cross section of the true society. Do you know what I mean? If you go out into the real society, there's so many different types of people, and there are lots of thoughtful people and intelligent people and all. Sometimes in our communities you have um sometimes I think it skews a certain way, the types of people that are there. And I think personally, the best thing I think that any devotee can do is get out in the world and live. And like, and then figure out how you're going to be a devotee. Like, how is all of that informing your understanding of it? Like, of course, you need a foundation. Like, in order to do that, you have to have a foundational kind of framework, or and that was one of the blessings of being a brahmachari for those years. Was it I often think of it like, if sometimes we use the term samskars, like an impression. It went
Yeah.
very deep. That was a very deep samskar, like it was really in there. And so then when I was out in the world, I'm not, some people would say it's foolhardy, but I'm not scared to be out in the world. Do you know what I
Mm,
mean?
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I'm not going to try and hide from the world. Like, I want to, if this is a real thing, I want to see how it works in the world. Do you know what
Beautiful.
I mean? Um, but equally, if we were to look very from the outside, somebody would say, and we've had this conversation the other day, like as devotees progress, it would appear that as they, let's say, have more of these questions, or maybe they're going through navigating their doubts, or they've seen things that make them uncomfortable about the, not necessarily the philosophy, but the way in which the philosophy is enacted or preached, or the behavior between devotees doesn't seem to live up to the philosophy, or whatever, so many different things, and they're going through all of that, then they sort of appear to kind of, let's say, drift out of that sort of bubble that's in
Yes.
the past been around temples. Now, I know from being the brahmachari, it is quite a good analogy, the scene, the film scene. When I was standing as the brahmachari, we used to call those people fringies. And we were thinking in our minds, they're just out of it. They because according to what we thought was in it, that they weren't doing that. So
Yeah.
so it's an irony in a way, because just like, maybe kids look at adults and think, oh, they're so boring. They just, do the same thing, or whatever, but they don't understand. You have to grow up. You have to like get to that point. Um, and the irony of it, I think, is that often the first people that the public meets is the people in the bubble. And for all the enthusiasm and everything, as when you get further along, you just think, oh, I don't know if those are the best people for them to meet. In one way, it is, because they're shiny, like the REM song, devotees used to think that maybe that's about, they're shiny, they're
Shiny,
happy,
happy
they're
people.
attractive. Yeah. And it is true. And you look at them and they do, they are, it's a blissful time, and they do look like they're from Vaikuntha for sure. Um, but it does need to mature, I think.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. It really is a maturation of faith. At least that's how I see it.
Yeah.
And in the beginning, our faith is is tender, and it's small. So most of our faith is placed in the externals.
Mm.
We can be certain about the externals. That's where our certainty comes from. Our faith comes from the external things.
Mm.
But as we but our faith is actually tender, and that's why we need to have those sure structures, so that our faith can grow in richness and depth. And as that happens, then our dependency on things to be rigid and firm, they need to be firm because we're not firm. But
Mm.
as our faith becomes firm, then those external things don't actually need to be as firm as they were in the
Mm.
beginning. That our faith and our trust builds, and it's a natural and organic thing. But we have to know that that's the goal, that that's
Yeah.
something that we should aspire for, and not to hold on to it rigidly, but to allow it actually to unfold, that that's a sign of a maturing faith and not a sign of a weakening faith
But I think
necessarily.
but I think this conversation and conversations like this, and when we met at that retreat, and I've had conversations with other devotees over the years here and there, they're so important, because there's a certain point in that journey where you don't know that it's
Okay.
a natural part of maturing, or it's okay, or it's a phase, whatever.
Yeah.
You just think like, my God, is it like you're kind of a
Exhausted.
bit confused, yeah, in the whole thing. And so I was just thinking, so what gives me faith in the uncertainty? I'll be honest. Like I feel like in some ways I've got very strong foundational faith, but at the same time I'm aware that it's delicate for the last few years. But I'm not worried about it, but I'm kind of, but it's sort of it's uncertain in some respects. So there's obviously an uncomfortableness with that. But my conversations that I'm when I have conversations like this, or with devotees who are in their own way going through something similar, that gives me real faith, because it doesn't necessarily give me certainty, but it gives me faith that, oh, okay, so we're kind of out here with the compasses and with the the orienteering sheet or whatever together.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And we're
Yeah.
sort of we're trying to figure it out. And that is great. And also it gives me personally real faith that I want to be around devotees, because these kind of devotees, I feel, whereas sometimes I think to myself, I don't really want to be around these people at all. And I don't mean it like to I'm not judging them. I'm just saying, but it's my choice. I don't want to be. It doesn't. It doesn't. It just like it doesn't have a positive effect on me.
Doesn't
Yeah.
inspire you.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't. If the opposite.
Yeah.
And sometimes, and um, so yeah, I get great. I remember once I had a conversation a bit like this, and it struck me because, and I said it to you the other day. I'm always slightly nervous, a teeny bit, because I like to be very honest and really genuinely, share what I really think. And there's certain phrases that we all have heard over the years that get rammed kind of in there. And the kind of phrases like, oh, you're just speculating. How could you know with your pea brain or your monkey brain or your frog brain or whatever it is you want to call it?
You're controlled by your senses.
Yeah, all of that stuff. It's just to doubt you, like to chip you down, chip you down.
Right.
And the thing
Which
is
may
that,
be considered abusive,
yeah, in some ways it is, because it's not
psychological
saying,
abuse and
yeah,
manipulation.
no, definitely, because it's not saying, okay, well, let's explore this together. Let's have a think
Yeah.
about this. Let's talk about
Yes.
it. That's not what's happening. It's trying, and we hear, there's a lot of things that have crept into the dynamic, the shopping guru or the I smashed him, or all of this type of stuff. And it's just like, for whatever, when I was young, yeah, kind of it feels like an action movie or whatever. It might be some kind of a rasa and all of that thinking. But
Rambo.
actually, yeah.
Rambo.
Yeah, Rambo. But it's actually like it's very superficial
Yeah.
effect. I've been in classes, we must all have been, where someone, and it could be a guest or it could be a devotee, basically gets dissected, and often in a very humorous kind of a way, and everyone's going ho 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 and laughing about it. And this person, and it's just actually, if you think about it, it's just a really ugly,
Yeah.
unnecessary thing to happen.
Yeah.
You know. Anyway, well, I did have a anyway, I kind of had a train of thought which I've lost, but maybe it'll come back. But
Maybe I can help you bring it back. Let's see. To me, the distinction that we haven't yet invoked is objective versus subjective certitude.
can I jump back because I remember?
Yes, please.
Um, so I'm always a tiny bit nervous because there's that little thing in the back of my head which is like, you can make your point, but don't get carried away, Don't kind of overstep the line too far. You don't want to be offensive and all of that. And so I try to anchor myself with, like, I'm genuinely trying to be sincere about all of my endeavor to understand and to co-navigate, like, as we go through this. So I kind of feel like I'm okay, but I am always a teeny bit nervous about it. But this one devotee said to me, we had a kind of a conversation, and they said, I feel like this is a pivotal moment in my spiritual life, from my understanding. And I think all I really did was just say stuff that they probably already were thinking, or but no one had ever said it to them.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And I think that really struck me, and I was like,
Yeah.
wow, that is like, this is important. Like, that
Yeah.
we are honest with each other and able
Yes.
to kind of guide each other through these things.
Yeah. Legitimize each other's, normalize the struggle that's there, instead of pedestalizing an ideal that's not attainable, and it's actually not even something to strive for, but to normalize these struggles. And the more
Mm,
that we can do that, and I think one thing that's helping with that is that more normal people are actually able to have a conversation. There is a platform for this, whereas before it might be a leader or somebody who was up on a pedestal that had to perform in a certain way, that had to cut a profile. that had
Mm.
to, act and speak in a certain way, supposedly to enthuse devotees. But if they would have been able to be vulnerable and be themselves, like we learned of something that happened where he was a guru, and he had developed a drinking problem,
Yeah,
and he expressed this to his disciples,
I heard. Yeah.
and his disciples are like, oh, it's Leela, he's like fall around drinking Varuni. And the guru's like, no, 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 no. Actually, this is a problem. Oh, he's so humble. You know? And then he told his god brothers, and his god brothers are
Like
like,
waving the flag, like help,
yes,
Yeah,
help.
yes,
yeah, help
yeah,
me. Yeah.
yeah. But and his god brothers are like, no, 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 you can't say that. People's faith will be broken. But
Yeah.
actually, if it came out, yes, and people accepted it and heard it, then
Mm,
all those other people who were struggling with similar things, or just struggling at all,
mm,
no, oh, actually struggles are part of it. And like in the Midoriya Kadambini, that's why these things are there, that the stages of devotional practice are given in the pitfall, the things that we go through and experience psychologically.
mm.
This is normal. We're going to run hot. We're going to run cold. We're gonna, do all kinds of things. This is normal. So there's a place for
Yeah.
for
And
sharing that.
the family analogy is quite a good a good analogy, I think, because in family, we often talk about generational trauma and all of this stuff. And kind of like if you don't do anything, the patterns, it's not that they might repeat, they will definitely repeat.
Definitely. Yeah,
Definitely repeat. Um, and so in I've even seen it in my own relationships. If someone comes to you and they're in distress or in difficulty, um, if you are not emotionally grounded and regulated, you will probably try to shut them down because it makes you feel so uncomfortable.
exactly.
Um, and then you think you're dealing with it, like
Right.
it's the appropriate response, but it's the only response you're capable of doing because
Yeah.
you are not
We don't have the
regulated.
capacity. We don't have the capacity to accommodate their
No, because
emotions.
your cup is already so full, like you just can't like
Yeah,
cope. So it's like boom. Um, and so it's kind of like that, it's like, and so it's not safe then for the person to come to you anymore
right.
because they know I will just get cut down.
Yeah,
So then what do they do? They'll bottle it up and and then we don't have to, say, what, but it just, it sort of,
Festers.
it's like sepsis,
Yeah,
it will
festers.
come out in deviant behaviors or in suicide or whatever, all these different things. So like a safe family or a safe community is one where you can bring your, well, first of all, your real self, but then you're also your problems. And and people, and it's safe, like you'll be able to be what do they call it, they'll create a space for you to to deal with it.
Yeah,
And we're so far away from that now, to be fair, like it's obviously a big, I'm not it's not like there's also in society, in broader society, like it's actually is quite a, you have to really go deep in yourself self and constantly be trying to evolve yourself to be that. Like it's hard, like it's really hard, like
yeah,
so it's not easy, but but even if you're falling short of it, like what you'd hope that at least there's the awareness that that's what we want to be. Do you know
exactly.
what I mean?
Yeah,
um Rather than just the kind of um the shut door, I just see yeah, there's a chat coming, a comment coming there.
Ravi, I think I could even extend what you're saying from the analogy of the family to just spirituality in general. And I'll play off of the term I used, which is you can be subjectively certain of truth for yourself,
Yeah.
without claiming objective certainty for everything and for all times and all space. And
Mm.
your ability to be certain about what you believe and have experienced and translate that into an openness to what others have believed and have experienced, to me, is called empathy. We can't really be empathetic if we're so convinced that we absolutely objectively know it all. Uh, and you used the term ugly. And I want to play off of that analogy. And I want to say that the standard by which we might measure something specifically and subjectively for us is a standard of beauty. How beautiful is it, or how ugly is it for our own concept towards our own conception?
Mm.
I think that's how we make a shift from, a sort of logical way of thinking that I can be logically certain that, oh, I don't know, God exists or the soul is eternal. And then I go from that to, and Krishna is blue and has a peacock feather and plays the flute. How do we make that jump? Well, the standard here is maybe some sort of logical reasoning, not devoid of emotion, but some sort of logical standard. Now we're on a beauty standard where it's really, really subjective. It's really just up to the individual taste, you might even say. And as an artist, I wanted to use the term earlier, isn't there artistic license in our depiction of the divine? If I'm a painter and I want to paint Krishna, it's not always the same hue of blue or whatever. Where's the artistic license in our spiritual creativity?
Mm. Great. I'm so glad you brought up this point because it's something I've been thinking about the last year. So, um, let me just get it right. So, I'll I'll kind of give context to it. So, I became convinced of Krishna consciousness, I guess, philosophically initially, and very kind of convinced because I felt like it made sense. Like I went through all of the like, was it this compared to this compared to that compared, like, and it was like, okay, like it makes complete sense. So I did I wasn't subjectively certain. I felt like I was absolutely certain. And it wasn't like I was very much the opposite of, well, I love your point there that this is something that I like and I really appreciate it and it helps me along on my spiritual path and I can appreciate other people. And I could appreciate other people, but it was like, yeah, but no, this is a step beyond that. I have arrived at the absolute truth that is above all else, like it is the pinnacle of everything, and it is defined, and there's no other which way to see it. Um, and I felt like, and I still feel like, I think to this day, and again, I want to be honest enough to say I'm speaking for how I see it, and maybe others see it differently, but I feel like that is what Srila Prabhupada said. Do you know what I mean? This is the thing, and it's like that's what baffles me. Like it was but in recent times I've been thinking, and it was like, this is not a relative way of seeing the supreme. This is not a religion, and your religion is nice, my religion is nice. It's not all of those things. Do you know what I mean? He went all in. And and the thing is that I've been thinking in more recent times, the thing that we used to kind of look down on, like, it's not a relative thing. Now I actually could almost accept it easier if that's what it was, because you could just say, well, this is a path that I like. I find it really nice. It's a great way to, think about it. And I can appreciate your path. And, there are obviously many similarities and whatever. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, but that is not, in my understanding, what he said. Back to you, Raz.
I kind of think it really depends on how we understand the terms, even relative and absolute.
Mm.
To think that absolute is a finite, dimensional
Or
thing
destination. Yeah.
that that this is what it is, and I can collect it and I could put it in my pocket. This is, but absolute is is the very opposite of that. And it contains and is at the same time all of relativity.
Mm.
So I do think that there is an objective, absolute truth that contains within it and is everything. It is
Yes.
all relationality.
Yes.
It is
Mm.
all of everything, and everything belongs within it. Not that we have to cancel absolute truth in the favor of
Right.
relativity, but to
Mm.
see everything as being a part of that absolute truth. Everything is harmonized
Mm.
within the absolute truth.
Well, it's beautiful, but like the cause of all causes. Do you know what I mean? It's like, okay, I know this is one thing. Another thing that I have to make sure I remind myself of is like I'm using my intellect and my brain, which is coming from a limited context to try to understand these things. I get that, but like the reason why I think perhaps, and I don't want to say perhaps it simplified it, but it was so kind of didactic, is because it's easy to drift into what might be deemed impersonalism when we sort of go, oh, it's all, it's all kind of part of the same thing, and it's all, do you know what I mean? Most spiritualists are floating about in somewhere in that kind of thinking. So how do we have the absolute connectedness and the absolute embracing of all relativity in an absolute platform, yet still that most people can accept because it's kind of easy. It's like, oh, it's one, and all of those cliches. But beyond that, that then no, there is an ultimate planet and there's an ultimate person. And do you see what I'm saying? Now, I'm
Yeah,
not saying it's not true, but I'm just saying it really is. That's why it's so attractive in a way, because he was saying he totally and definitely and completely knows.
yeah,
Um, yeah, and just as a small thing, I know I'm throwing a lot of things in the pot here, but we are in our thing and we hear like, oh, Lord Chaitanya and this and that, and all. If you just in that, like you're an academic, Yugala, or you're a theologian or whatever, you take a semester on a certain course, and in that course, according to what's taught to you, you have a body of understanding, but it was only certain things on your course. If you go to the Swami Narayans or whatever, they have an entirely different whole thing, and to them it's complete, and everybody's in it, and there's all the characters, and this guy came 500 years ago and he's a totally different guy, and he's like the Lord Chaitanya. And do you see what I mean?
yeah,
And it's like you suddenly go, whoa. So in a way, we're in our college or whatever, and we've taken
Yes.
our course and we have our understanding, and hopefully it's bringing us along in our understanding, But I think for me anyway, at a certain point in it, I had that certitude that no, not it doesn't matter what any of the other colleges in the whole planet teaches. I have the clarity, the defined path, the jigsaw. You know what I mean? And I just think now I'm at a place where I'm kind of, I suppose, realizing that actually within the absolute there is all this relativity,
Mhm.
um and it's just not how I once saw it. I don't no longer see it how I once saw it.
yeah,
Yeah. The question that came to my mind when Bhakti Ras mentioned, kind of the absolute side of things, um, was yes, and how can I ever know that wholly? And maybe I think she alluded to the answer, which is that you can't. You can't box the infinite in.
Mm,
I mean, that should be a comforting thought, um, because it's actually more similar to what we experience here. Things won't be so different. One of my biggest fears, growing up as a Catholic, was heaven sounds really boring. What do you do for eternity? That is terrifying that you do
Don't you like
nothing,
harp music?
that you do nothing. I had no visualization.
Polish the silver and stuff like that. No.
Even that I had
Eat
nothing
grapes.
because they just don't have that much written about transcendence in that tradition, what
Mm,
it looks like post transcendence. We do, we have this very specific, all these discourses on the ultimate transcendental state.
mm,
Um, and from there we invoke this, we get drunk on certitude,
mm,
and then it's like it slips between the fingers. Um, is it even natural to the human mind to have absolute certainty at all? It doesn't seem like that's what we work off of here.
mm.
It's that thing
That's
that's
what we
always
want.
out of grasp.
That's what we want, though. We strive for that. And because there does need to be some order.
Mm.
Too much chaos will make you go crazy. Too much
And too
chaos
much order,
and too much
similarly.
order will make you go crazy
But isn't that near
also.
Magra how it's like it can be on both sides?
Yes,
You can be too lax or too strict. It's like,
yeah.
but
There's
again,
gotta
that
be
No
a
way.
requires.
middle path.
Yeah, I mean, I remember. It's funny. Just a story. I remember I spent a bit of time, probably a couple of 3 month blocks in the 90s in the Chowpatty temple in Mumbai, Radhanath Swami's temple. And they'd have the morning program, and then they'd have a brahmachari class for probably from 10 to about half 11, and then they'd go out and do different things. And this one time, one of those twins, Janani Vas or Pankaj were there from Mayapur, Pujaris, and Radhanath Swami was in the class. I say a class, it was much more of a very informal. It was in a room, everyone's talking. And they were asking this Pujari, so what is the exact standard? Like, we're supposed to do, like 4, 3, 2, whatever it is, Um, and they wouldn't give an answer. And he was just going, doesn't matter. And they were going, no, 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 but like you've got to tell us, like we need to know. And even Radha was saying to him, and he was like, it doesn't matter. Just, that's not what it's about. Now, obviously, I suppose there are standards and stuff to maybe to make us understand that it's serious and like you got to be clean and there's certain things, but like beyond that though,
Yeah.
it's the feeling and the offering. And I was just thinking when you were just saying there, I don't know why it just came to my mind. Like, say, we know when you're young and might be like in love or something, and you're kind of like it's the sweet things are like lying in the grass, whatever, talking like all the little things. Like, and no one sees that. It's the private moments that
Mm.
are the little things, the sweet things. And so, in a way, now. I mean, I'll be doing like big devotional service like I was at one time, but if I can just, even for a moment, sit down and look, I don't have to be looking at my deities, but I can be just any time and just actually like being in and talking to Krishna or whatever and being in
Present.
relation like that magic that you can't sort of order or
Yes.
it's not often, but when it's there, it's like it's so sweet.
Yeah.
So I guess in a way, you do need the order and the structure and all of that. But like ultimately, wouldn't the pinnacle be if we were just in that kind of relation all the time in a very fluid, organic way that's unique to us?
I totally think that's what we are aspiring for, and
Yeah.
and we might miss that message. And again, it's easier to, in a way, it's kind of like purchasing something, you know,
Mm.
rather than making something by hand from scratch.
Yeah.
It's so much easier. Just go buy a loaf of bread. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
why? But you can actually grow your own wheat and be a part of the making of this thing. Or you can just go buy a loaf of bread. So it's like we can do things just formulaically. It's
Mm.
easy, but it doesn't, but where's the heart has to be there as well.
Mm.
So like handmade items, people buy them because there's heart there, because
Yeah.
they're handmade. The person is there.
Personal. Yeah.
It's personal. It's not made by a machine, which kind of, you know, religious formulas and things can kind of be seen like that. They have their place,
Mhm.
um, so that we can learn, different things and acclimate ourselves to a particular viewpoint. But
Mm.
it's not meant to stay there, and to miss the heart of of the experience of the creation of what is being created here, which is, I love that point. I actually had it written down, how creativity is related to certainty, and how it's squelched, and how much
Mm.
creativity is a part of the love journey.
Yeah.
Is there love without creativity?
And also uncertainty. It's like I was just a couple of things. So with I don't know if you've heard this idea, like, rupture and repair. You actually can't have repair and go deeper if there's no rupture.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
you need, so actually in a way, and in relationships that are not superficial, like hopefully it's not a big rupture, but like, the sweetness and the level of kind of reconnection that you can have after rupture, it's not cheap. You can't get that easily. Like, do you know what I mean? It's quite it has to be trust and sort of vulnerability and all of those things in that to get to that. And I was just thinking as well, like the the certainty thing, like I'm just very conscious in myself. I have that part of me, and everyone maybe will have their own version of this, but like that very laser focused, definite kind of certitude kind of part of me that enables me to do a lot of things and to really kind of move in the world, like, in a very definite way. And so it is useful. It's not a bad thing.
Like
But
confidence.
yeah, but just kind of like I feel like I could pick up a mountain. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like a sort of
Power.
focus. Yeah, and whatever. And the thing is though, but that sort of rigidity, that laser like determination and focus is great. But if you get stuck there, which I sometimes do, then you it like I said, it cuts off that creativity, but it can be damaging for relationships. So like sometimes, like I said before we came on, we're doing some stuff in the house. So in a room, somebody, meaning my wife, will will say, "Oh, what about if we do it like that?" And sometimes I'll be like, "No," because I've already decided it needs to be like this, and I'm rigid, and I'm stuck to it. And actually, what I'm not realizing, which I'm trying to learn, is that I may have a very fixed thing of it, but like let's explore, let's be
Mhm.
creative, let's be curious, let's
Yeah.
go through it together and see. And we might think, oh, well, it's not like that, it's like this. That's okay, whatever. But because my brain, my mind wants to get. It's very, it's a bit. I think it's a bit ADHD or whatever, but it wants to get to from A to B quickly and
Yeah.
definitely. And the thing is that it doesn't matter whether I'm right or wrong. It's not a nice experience, and so. And oftentimes what happens is I'll be very definite. And then after a little while, I'll come back and I'll go, actually, you know what? That was actually a pretty good suggestion. And let's try it. Actually, it is a better suggestion. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so it's that I guess these are all parallels in a way for how we can be in relation with God as well.
Exactly.
The
Yeah.
term kept coming to my mind, resolute,
Mm,
very determined, very resolute. And of course, a related word is resolution, how you have conflict and you have resolution to the
mm,
conflict. And it's not that a resolution is once and for all. How so many resolutions in policy and in law to turn into point one, point two, 1.1, 1.1.1.2. Like the resolutions will continue to happen as the story continues to unfold. Conflict is an unavoidable part of the story. And I don't know, to relate this back to our, uh, understanding of faith, it would be maybe cheap to believe in something that you've never had to struggle with.
Mm. Yeah, and I was also thinking like, when like in the last year or so, occasionally I will talk to Krishna, and I'll sort of just talk about what's going on, like, this stuff. And, just say that, I'm kind of confused, and like I'm trying to work it out, and just sort of, I guess it's being sort of vulnerable, I guess. And it is in those moments in any relationship when it when it can be kind of quite real.
Yeah. And that's the whole goal of sadhana, really, I believe, is to learn how to expose and disclose ourselves
Mm,
to divinity, how we can show up naked and be seen. And as darshan, that's how it is to be seen by God, not to see God.
mm,
And again, that vulnerability, and I think about vulnerability a lot, and I've really come to see that it's like such a key to our spiritual life, because without vulnerability, we won't. I think it's really tied in directly with being lovable, feeling lovable, and being able to love. I don't
mm.
think that we can love until we feel that we are lovable. And
Yeah,
we
I
won't
agree.
feel lovable unless we are vulnerable, because we'll always hide behind those things that um, that we don't want to show anyone. We think, oh, if they knew this about me,
Yes.
they
They would
wouldn't
never
love
love me.
me. They wouldn't
Yeah,
love me.
yeah.
So therefore, we think that is not lovable. I'm not lovable. And if
Mm.
this was disclosed, then they wouldn't love me. So to
Yeah.
be vulnerable allows us to be accepted and to know that we are actually lovable unconditionally. And therefore, it allows us to engage freely in such a development of a loving relationship.
Mm. Yeah, it's such a and I think from what I understand, most people really, really, really struggle to love themselves. And exactly why, I mean, who knows? But like, I suppose they say, your inner talk, So like I was sort of saying there, wasn't I, about like all these phrases that are there in the sort of ether of, the devotee landscape, like you know, where, they're they say a child's inner talk will be however their parent spoke to them. And
Yes.
so is the voice saying to you, you know, trust yourself, like, and all of these positive things to help you through it? Or is it kind of knocking you down and saying, how would
Lower
you?
than a worm in stool.
Yeah, and all that stuff. You know what I mean? And so, like, in a
And
way,
hopefully the parent isn't threatened by the child. It's usually the ones you mentioned fear, and
mm,
it's usually the ones who are preaching with a hammer are sometimes the ones who are most afraid. A parent you wouldn't think would ever be afraid in a safety sense of a child. Maybe there's a deeper kind of fear that we can try to talk about.
mm. Well, it's interesting though, isn't it? A lot of times, like as a parent, it's not even like, certainly a parent shouldn't be like that, but a lot of times they didn't get it. So it's like you're kind of modeling whatever you got, you know.
Right.
And there's something fascinating that my wife, she's always like reading about different types of. I think she's really interested in gentle parenting. And this thing that she shared with me that I came across is like the way you respond to your child at a particular age, say 4 years old, may often be how you were related to when you were 4 years old. So it's almost like it's you there.
Yeah.
And so
Yes.
that's where, you know, we can't change the past. So maybe we got a great parent. Maybe we all probably got parents that were trying their best, but like whatever it was in the past, that's the work. I think you see, this is the work to do, whether you're a devotee or not a devotee. It doesn't matter. Like everyone has to do this. Like,
Yeah.
is to go, well, how can I try and do better?
Mhm.
Um, And if we're just going and you hear it like, well, I had to put up with it, so you could put up with it, or all these different types of things, you know, like, well, in my day it was like this, or whatever, you know, um, or you know, well, we can't change it, we have to do that, you know, whatever. Then how, like, and like you said earlier, is it beautiful or is it ugly?
Yeah.
Ultimately you gotta go, well, I don't care what you're saying. Like, if the result of it is not good, then you've got to pay some attention
Yeah.
and go, something needs to change.
Mhm.
Yes. Yeah.
Otherwise, like, you can be in your certitude, hammering away in your confidence that you're doing it, but ultimately, and this is so sadly why, like, people who are a bit more maybe thoughtful will go, well, you can have it, you can keep it as well, and we'll
Right.
go somewhere else,
Yes. Right.
you know, you know.
Dr. Russ, when you were talking about vulnerability, a line came up for me related to similar concepts, that it requires humility to be authentic. I mean, you could swap courage in for humility. It requires courage to be authentic. You have to be willing to be judged and seen,
Mhm.
and that's scary. And authenticity, I think we could easily, almost we could say that is at its root vulnerable. This is myself, right?
Yeah, without a mask.
Hmm. I like we were reading Gabor Mate a bit back in the summer, and he says that the two things a child needs, will stay with the child and the parents and for a moment, are attachment and authenticity. For a child to actually grow safely and maturely, to survive even at all, it needs, number one, it needs attachment, specifically to the mother. It literally attaches to the mother's breast. Without that, there's no material life.
Hmm.
And then
Secure attachment, isn't it, though? Secure attachment.
yes, thank
Yeah.
you, secure attachment. And then from there, it needs the permission to be authentic, to be itself. And it'll start receiving cues from the parents very early, whether is it okay to cry? Is it okay to uh anything? But
Hmm.
I really believe he hit something there with that theory, and that authenticity we could easily relate to vulnerability as our core, our platform of self-development, of spiritual development.
Hmm.
Yeah, and we have a very vulnerable God
Hmm.
and a very, very authentic and very vulnerable God.
Yeah. Yeah, very quirky. I mean, I mean, mischievous, you know, all of those things. I mean, something that just came to mind. One of the things that was probably bothering me the most in the last year or two was the price. So it was a sort. I was aware that, like, you know, on this kind of part of the path that I'm on, the price is you often lose community. And in a world where community is like hugely valuable and kind of rare. A lot of people are lonely, they don't have community, they don't, you know. Um, and what does community mean? I suppose it kind of means acceptance. It's somewhere where you're accepted. And then when you realize that, like, if this part of where I'm at, if like kind of means that maybe I'm not accepted, or then I'm paying a big price to lose that sort of sense of community. And it's a very subtle thing, and you know, maybe it's subjective. I don't know how much like people are really thinking it, but you just get that sort of feeling like, hmm, you know, such and such, oh yeah, maybe they're just a bit like they're not really in it anymore, or they're not as whatever it is,
Right.
um and um and I get it, like, in a way, like that an in-group needs to have something that defines it, that unifies them, and that's what it means to be in the group. Um, but I suppose what you would hope is just that the group could expand to allow for not such a narrow definition of what it means to be in the group, if you know what I mean. Because
Yeah.
then we could all be in the group. We'd just be different. It
Yes.
wouldn't just look like one thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
And
think
yeah.
it's very organic. Um, you know, there's that saying, birds of a feather flock together. And there's, it is an organic thing. And because we are a part of a whole, that our sense and our desire and our drawing to be to belong, to recognize that we are a part of something bigger is quite a natural drive, because it's our ontology. We are a part of something bigger, but we feel separated, isolated, withdrawn from it, excluded from it. So we're always trying to make to be to fit in somewhere. And then Maharaj makes this, Padmanabha Swami makes such a distinction between fitting in and belonging.
Yeah.
Belonging, we already belong. And to see how and where we belong, that's part of the meaning of Tadatmya, is this empathetic belongingness that we just need to discover. That while he was traveling around the world meeting different people, it's like, oh wow, this community, it's already it's all we do belong to each other already.
But we may
It's
not be connected.
we're
That's the
just
thing. Yeah. Yeah.
separate. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that, Tadatmya, the Sangha, that's like one of the beautiful things about it is that we are able to connect with each other in so many different ways, out of a natural. We are already doing this. We are already our own selves. But now we have found a community of people who are similar to us, who
Yeah.
are just as weird as us. And and um, and it is a really beautiful thing, because
Yeah.
belonging is a natural, it's a very natural and organic um, need that we have. And it's so combined with individuation. Those two things are not excluded, because we can't really belong until we individuate, but we won't know who we are as individuals unless we are in relationship with each other, because that's where we find ourselves, in
Yeah.
relationship,
Yeah.
in community. So this is, they seem paradoxical, but both are so necessary and intertwined and part of the same thing.
Yeah, it's like I say, it's such a breath of fresh air when you do connect with others and realize that you're not alone in going through these things.
Yeah.
I just wonder if it's okay just to make an acknowledgement of Diane, just left a comment there, but the Bhakti recovery group is really helping devotees so they can be honest with their struggles. I've seen some of those 12-step groups and they are amazing. I mean, and it's great that the devotees are doing it too, just to be able to be in a room where you can, and isn't it ironic, like, where people are going through a very difficult situation, but then that actually gives them access then to that kind of a space where they can, because everyone's in the same situation. And the irony is that, everyone, people might think, oh, well, that's because they're, in recovery, or, addicts or whatever. But actually, everyone could do it that, because whatever our struggles are, they might be slightly different or whatever, but everybody needs that kind of a space to be able to bare themselves and say, look, because we're not really that different from each other, it might be slightly different, but we're all going to be struggling with something, whatever it is.
Absolutely.
So it's great that devotees are doing that now.
I'm so happy to see that. I know in my first few years, I recognized a need, but I didn't have the ability or willingness to do anything about it,
Mm.
other than leave.
Yeah.
You know, I knew there was a need for people to really express what's going on in their minds and hearts. Um, I knew there was like the language had become so fixed and that there was a revolution in language that needed to come.
Mm.
Um, and it's just really good knowing that I wasn't alone in that thought, clearly, because others have acted on that and they are building these sorts of groups.
Mm.
Um, I mean, it could be everything from codependency to addiction to, you know, uh, masturbation, pornography, to anger,
Yeah,
to
yeah.
depression and anxiety. Um, that's a
We're a mess.
definitely real part of the human journey.
Mm. And so much more prevalent, and like so much more common than people would um admit. Because you see, I suppose it's really interesting. There's a devotee that he does a lot of good work. I think he shares things on Facebook. Krishna Keshava, that's it. I've seen his posts, and he kind of shares stuff. I think he was for a long time part of ISKCON Resolve, and so he saw a lot of things, and he's kind of now reflecting on stuff, and being a bit of a voice like these talks, to kind of allow people to maybe see it a little bit of a different way. And I think there was a good dialogue on there, and I don't know if it was him or someone said, oh, we are like normal people or something like that, meaning non-devotees. And I said, no, we are normal people. Like, we're not different. We are just one of the people.
Right.
And yes, maybe we are trying to endeavor in a certain way, or we have some understanding that we've been gifted, fine. But we are very much, normal people.
Yeah.
And so why would, like, if it's like the idea of the drop, isn't it? The drop in the pure sense is of the same perfect nature of God, but equally in the sort of conditioned state, similarly, there's a sort of like we're like a conditioned drop. And so pretty much what everyone's struggling with,
Yeah.
in slightly different ways.
Yeah.
But it's not going to be that different, you know. So yeah, it's kind of like it's almost like, maybe that certitude for a bit makes us think we're above it all. But actually, almost until we go right back down to be in it again, we can't truly make progress. It's kind of like maybe the beginning part gives you that taste, that sort of something that makes you want to walk the path.
Yeah.
Um, but then to actually walk the path, I think you've got to go right back down almost to zero again and go, okay, well, because it's like I sometimes think of that analogy of the sat nav. You will never be able to get to the destination on the sat nav until you accurately know where you are on the map. And if you think you're somewhere else on the map
Yeah.
than where you really are, then you're not going to get there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's true. And I think that that initial stage is referred to as like, oh gosh, now it just left me, but enthusiasm, that
Utsaha.
initial, yeah,
Yeah.
that initial enthusiasm that gives us that burst that propels us. And and it is a type of excavation from there on into eternity, in like this spiral kind of dynamic where we might come around again to the same struggle, but we're going to be at a different place. We're going to be able to look at it in a different way, in a deeper way, and our struggles are going to mean something differently to us, even though we might come across the same, it might look like the same on the outside. But
Yeah.
internally, we're not that same person any longer. We've already gone around the spiral, we've come back, and we're going to approach it in a completely different way.
Mm.
So it's like one thing, just quickly, and we'll ask for if there's any questions, but this might be a bit of a digression, but when you were talking, Yugal, way long ago about the three ladus, about specificity,
Mhm.
I see sometimes that it's like, there's nothing wrong with specificity, but what does a ladu mean? What does three mean? In transcendence, we might think, yes, Krishna eats three ladus. What does
Mm.
eat mean? What does three mean? What does ladu mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
To define it and to limit it according to our experience here, and to think that that is what it is, I
Yeah.
think is the dangerous part.
Or the
And that,
Varaha form, right? What does 3 steps mean?
yeah,
No
right.
problem.
To find out.
Yeah.
So like that's a danger in the certainty, is is the limiting aspect of it. Not to think that there isn't an actual form of something, but to think that that form is limiting.
Or that I've understood it and I can quantify it, or like squash it into my
Exactly.
understanding, which is again, back to the thing of well-intentioned parenting. Like that is what they're trying to say when they say, your frog brain or your pre-brain or whatever. Like they're trying to help, but the way in which it's done is just so crass,
Yeah.
gross, whereas actually we've said the same thing right this second, but in a different way.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
With the language that
Yeah.
with a more neutral, balanced language.
Yeah,
And
like a
where it's coming
supportive.
from too. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Supportive. Like there was a devotee, the first devotee that I met, right from the get-go, like the second time I met him,
Mm.
he said, "Oh, you are such a fool." And when he said that, though, I was like rejoicing, because it actually came from a place of love
Yeah.
and concern. Now, somebody else tell me I'm a fool, it's like, forget that.
Yeah.
But I sense that it came from the right place. So
Mm.
even though the words might be the same word,
Mm.
we know where it's coming from. Srila Prabhupada could say like the worst things to you, and you'd be like, yes, but at the same time, if somebody else did it, it'd be
I
like,
suppose it's in the imitation, isn't it? There's a lot of imitation that came later on.
yeah, yeah, yeah. All right, so let's open it up, see if anybody in our Zoom group here, or somebody in YouTube, if they're out there, if you have a question or something that you'd like to add, contribute to the
Doesn't have to
conversation.
be a question, of
Yeah,
course, if you want to jump in
reflection.
the dialogue.
Sweet to tweet.
Nice to see you. I think, Sweta, did we meet in the retreat?
Well, yeah, we did meet. Yeah, I was there.
Yeah, nice to see
Nice to see you too. Um, yeah, I was actually thinking, I mean, when I joined, you were talking about Tribhuvanath, and
you.
uh, I've heard, I know, being in Ireland here, I've heard your name a few times, and it was always in connection to Tribhuvanath.
Yeah, I was with him the whole time, pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah, and actually, I want to share one story before I say something else. Some story that I've heard, like, of Tribhuvanath, something in relation to what you were discussing.
Mhm.
You probably know that better, I think. So it seems like there was some like discussion or confusion or back and forth regarding like, what to wear for Harinam. Like devotees were saying like white colored dhoti or saffron dhoti or something like that. And then um, Tribhunath was like, I don't care what color dhoti you wear. You wear rainbow colored dhoti if you want. You just come to Harinam. So like, I mean, to me, it says that he wasn't, fixated on these like externals, and he knew the essence of it. And
Mm.
like here in Ireland, he was I mean, even though I never got to meet him in person, I came here much, much later, but he's been one of the most attractive things about Irish Yatra for me.
Yeah. Thank you for
Yeah,
sharing. It's nice to remember him. Um, I'll just add a tiny one thing. When we used to do the festivals, he used to obviously we used to try and do the best presentation we could, but he said, he would have families there and kids on stage and everything, and it wasn't overly polished. He said we shouldn't present this idea that we're somehow perfect, or like he wanted to show obviously an attractive side to the whole thing, but like we're not
Human,
we're not overly polished,
yeah.
and I think
Relatable.
that relatable, yeah, yeah, yeah. Thank you for that, for sharing that. That's nice. Thank you.
yeah. And I wanted to say something else also. Like, I was thinking that, it's kind of relating to what Bhaktirasa was saying about the playground being foam now, And
Mhm.
I was laughing because, yeah, when we were growing up also, I mean, when I was growing up also, we didn't have any of that foam thingy, Maybe in India we still don't, a lot of the playgrounds. We still have like rough sand, gravel, whatever mixture that is. And to me, it seems like during Prabhupada, it wasn't so much a foam playground. It was more like a gravel, not even sand. But then it was later on that it became foam
Yeah.
playground. Um, and I was thinking that maybe, you also mentioned something about like, the stages in Madhurya Kadambini. And the first stage, Utsamai, it's like the stage where we are really certain about things, like we think we know everything and this is the way to do things. And to me, it seems like since there has been such a prominence or emphasis on preaching and more of like making new devotees, and then there is like a big surge of like new devotees, everybody in this uttahamai stage,
Mm.
certainty. And like, so it feels like why certainty has been like,
Interesting.
yeah, like devotees attached to that.
That's a
uh,
really good, that's a really good observation. So many people joining at once, being in that initial stage all at once. And it's like, oh, the whole mood of the movement is certainty, and therefore we have to preserve certainty. And Prabhupada was certain, and everything is certain.
Becomes
Interesting.
predominant, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, and it seems like that mood is almost like, I mean, the mood or the consciousness maybe like needed to reach a peak from which this new level of consciousness can emerge. So
Mm.
in that sense, it almost seems like, okay, it's okay, it's there, but yeah, what like you're doing with this sort of conversation here, like you were saying earlier,
Mm.
it's very much needed like at this time for the new level of consciousness to emerge.
Yeah, what's fascinating is it seems from what you were just saying there, that the canvas, let's just say, think of it like a painting. The canvas needs to expand. So if the prominent mood is this one thing, and we think that anything outside of that, we're suspicious of it, or we think it might be wrong, or it could be this or that or the other, there's no room for it. So it has to kind of just scatter out and, get lost and hopefully try and find each other like we are now. So, but if the canvas can be expanded so that we go, yeah, there's this part and it's really important and it's really great and it's really exciting and it's like but it's a part of the picture. It's a section of the picture. And these other parts are also fine. And there are other parts of the painting and they're there. And we can see them all on one canvas and embrace them all as different parts of the same thing. That's a healthy, like then we'll be in a good place, I think. Um, and the irony of all of that is that in many ways that is the philosophy. Like there's the different ashrams and different varnas and whatever, and like so evidently there are definitely different phases and stages, and they don't look all the same. But I tell you something so funny. Like so I sometimes get invited to go on different podcasts and stuff, just normal podcasts out in the world. And when I talk about my time as a monk, and the two big questions people ask you, of course, is why did you become a monk? But then probably the one they're more interested in, why did you stop being a monk? And the thing is that the way I have understood it over time by talking about it is it was there in the books all along that you would go to in the old times, the boys would go to the Gurukul and they would do the whole brahmachari thing. And at 25, almost without exception, they would go into married life. And maybe a rare one would be naturally suited to go on. Now, it was there in the books. It wasn't hiding, but I completely ignored it because I just thought, yeah, but that's just for wimps. Like if I've become a brahmachari at 2021 and I'm looking at my hero person who interestingly, Tribhuvan was a brahmachari for about 10 years when Prabhupada was there, and then he did get married for a bit, and but he came back, and so he was this brahmachari again. And I was just thinking, I want to be like that. And I want to do it for my whole life, ignoring that actually there's a reason why at 25 most people will go into married life, because most people are not cut out to be a brahmachari for their whole life. And in fact, they don't need to be. It's like not natural for them. It's not the best situation for them. So I completely ignored it, even though it was there. So in a way, we're sort of like, as I suppose that's what it means to mature, isn't it? To go, well, I don't need to be the biggest and the best and the fastest and whatever else. I need to do what's right
Be
at any
authentic.
time.
Be authentic.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Anything else? Does anyone have Nita Leela or anything? Diane, do you have any questions or anything you'd like to add to the conversation?
I just want to say I really appreciate it, and I don't have any questions. Unfortunately, I was in and out. I had other things going on, but I joined. I really like Ravi. I really appreciate your perspective, and it really resonated with me a lot what you said. So yeah, but unfortunately, it wasn't very. I've missed a lot, and I don't have anything to add. But thank you.
Well, thanks for being here. That added.
yeah, thank you. Thank
Your
you very much.
presence added.
I guess
Yeah.
I only have one thing to add, and it's actually just kind of funny because I'm a first grade teacher. I've taught kindergarten. If people are going to do that gentle parenting, please do it right. It doesn't mean that. Make sure your kid knows that when they come to school, everything is not going to be a debate. Sometimes I have to do things because your teacher asks you to. We're not always going to be able to have a long, drawn out conversation of why I want you to do it. That's
Yeah, definitely.
that's the only thing I was thinking. And then yeah, the playground thing too. I relate to that because when I was a kid, I did a spin around the monkey bars and fell on my head on the concrete. So yes, we were a lot stronger back then than we are now with the padding. Thank you so much for your talk today.
Thank you. Are you in America or?
Yes, I'm in Las Vegas. My accent is Wisconsin, but I live in Las Vegas.
Nice, nice. Can I just say something small? I totally understand what you're saying. I appreciate it. And that's where you see there's mainstream education and there's other types of education. Our son, our younger son, is he's got some autism and ADHD and different things. And so in a mainstream setting, it has to be like that, where, because there's 30 kids or however many kids, and it has to be sort of, but not every child fits into that. So I think it's just about,
Yeah.
but I get it. As a teacher in that type of setting, then I understand where you're coming from. But in the end, it was better for him to be in a different setting, just because in a mainstream they couldn't quite, understandably, just couldn't you can't have that level of differentiation because of the numbers and the pressures for teachers. But yeah, I hear what you're saying.
That opens
Yes,
up.
you're correct. I was gonna say you're correct that yeah, depending on the child and the school and what they need, yeah, they need different things for sure.
Yeah.
It's almost like the different ashrams or the different focus groups, the different clubs and activities. Because
Yeah.
Ravi, when you were speaking about like the need for things to change, the we, I was thinking, well, who is the we?
Yeah.
Um, are we talking about Gaudiya Vaishnavism as such? Are we talking about ISKCON? Are we talking about institutions? Are we talking about
Mm.
people who occupy those institutions? Um,
I guess I was thinking a person, whoever they are, who comes in touch with this path, that as they progress along it, that they would hopefully have this broader appreciation and acceptance of different types of devotees at different stages, not at the exclusion of where they're at for their bit. Do you know what I mean? That they can kind of, there's a place that they feel like there's a place for everyone within it. Whereas I think in the past, it was kind of like there's this, and anything outside this just
is
is
it
kind of like not rich.
adulteration?
Yeah, it's not really, it's sort of, it's dropped off, or, the old classic blooped
Right.
kind of phrase.
That kind of sounds radically personal.
Yes, yes, indeed. Yeah. And it's wonderful. I mean, I know we've connected, Swami Padmanabh is extraordinary. I mean, he's young. He's young and he's got so many of the things that we've talked about are things that he's deeply exploring and writing about and talking about, and I think as much as it is important, very important for us, uh, lay people, if you like, to have these conversations, it is still important also for leaders or people who are more in the sort of leadership or prominent positions to in some ways you could argue it's almost equal or more important, because there is a tendency for people to look to those kind of people.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
so when they're speaking like that, then it is really great to see.
Yeah.
Yes.
Again, it gives that permission. It paves the way for us to actually legitimize the things that we already see.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You brought up
So
just maybe a sort of a final thought. Do you have to get off
no,
here?
no, no. I was gonna say, so big shout out to Swami Padmanabh.
Uh, yeah. Maybe one last comment I would like to add is, how important it is to make room for all sorts of heroes,
Mm,
regardless of gender, regardless of sexuality, regardless of ashram. Like your connection to that fellow was somewhat through the ashram. Oh, he leads such a good example in that ashram.
mm.
We need those people across all ashrams. We need the role models and the mentors across all ashrams, for sure, across genders, of
Mm,
course, you
mm.
know. But maybe that would be more for another time. I don't know. Bhakti Ross?
Yeah, I would think that's for another time.
That's a good topic, though.
Yeah.
Leadership, like different types of leaders across different, that's quite a good topic. Yeah.
So I have a quote that I was thinking I could just share, and we can end with this. This is found in Radical Personalism. It's actually a quote from Alan Watts that's quoted
Oh, yeah.
there. And it's from The Wisdom of Insecurity. So it says, the believer will open his mind to the truth on the condition that it fits in with his preconceived ideas and wishes. Faith, on the other hand, is an unreserved opening of the mind to truth, whatever it may turn out to be. Faith has no preconceptions. It is a plunge into the unknown. Belief clings, but faith lets go. In this sense of the word, faith is the essential virtue of science and likewise of any religion that is not self-deception.
Can you read that? Can you read the last line again? Sorry.
Yes. In this sense of the word, faith is the essential virtue of science and likewise of any religion that is not self-deception.
Wow. Wow. There's a lot of things in there, isn't there? Yeah.
Alan Watts, Ki Jai.
There's that's an amazing quote. Thank you so much for that. Just to sort of parallel to it is similar in it. A friend of mine is a musician and he has a lyric in a song which is the only way we can hold on to this love is with an open hand. So it's like,
Yeah.
whereas you think you hold on to it by having a closed hand, right? But you have to be willing for it
To let it
to
go.
go or to stay. But it has to be like it's a choice, isn't it? Yeah,
Yeah, that's super beautiful. So
yeah.
thank you so much for joining us here, Ravi, and making this happen. Thanks,
Mhm.
Nicola. And
It's
thank
such a
you,
pleasure. Thank you.
all of you who joined in and to be a part of it.
And
It's a
thank you,
beautiful
Bakiras.
conversation, and I really look forward to more of this in the future. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure to meet you, Ravi. Thank you, everybody.